The Empire had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years, and in all that time, no species had ever broken the sacred boundary laws and gotten away with it. The elven race had been pushed beyond the Veil Nebula for their mastery of void magic, deemed too dangerous to exist near other civilizations. Dragons were hunted, until almost none remained, their ability to bond with other beings, labeled as weapons that could destroy worlds, But humanity had never been good at following rules. They did not write themselves, Captain Laura Hayes stood on the bridge of the massive vessel called with her hands behind her back, She watched the purple clouds of the Veil Nebula fill the giant screen in front of her, The ship was huge, nearly 8 kilometers long, covered with weapons that had never been fired in real combat, The Council had told humanity very clearly that they could not build anything larger than small frigate ships, Humanity had built a dreadnought instead, The communications officer spoke up from her station, Captain, we are receiving a distress signal from inside the nebula, audio only, encrypted with very old technology, Laura narrowed her eyes, play it, Static filled the bridge speakers, and then a voice came through that seemed to carry the weight of centuries, It was female, elegant, yet edged with desperation that could not be hidden, To any who can hear this transmission, my name is, I am the last daughter of the royal bloodline, They have sent their executioners to finish what they started 3,000 years ago, If there is anyone in this galaxy who still believes in justice over tyranny, I ask not for mercy, but for a chance to fight back, my companion, and I will not die quietly or without honor, The message ended with a sound that made every human on the bridge freeze in place, It was a dragon roar, deep and resonant, unlike anything in their databases or historical records, Commander Kate turned to Laura with wide eyes, Captain, entering the nebula would be considered an act of war against the Empire, They will see it as humans allying with criminals. They exiled, Laura smiled, but there was no humor in it, then. We better make it worth the trouble, helm, set course into the nebula, full speed, and someone get me everything we have on elven nobility and dragon bonding rituals, As the moved forward into the purple mist, violating every treaty humanity had ever signed with the, Laura could not shake the feeling that this moment would be remembered for generations, whether it would be remembered as humanity's greatest triumph or its final mistake remained to be seen, Deep within the nebula, stood on top of a crystalline rock formation, with her silver hair whipping in the strange winds, her armor had been forged from starlight and shadow, according to the old ways, but now it was cracked and scorched from countless battles, beside her, The dragon spread his massive wings defensively, his scales gleamed like molten gold, and his eyes held the wisdom of ages measured in rather than centuries, They are coming again, rumbled in her mind through their bond, the never grow tired of hunting us, Then we will make them regret their persistence, replied aloud, though her voice carried a tremor. She could not quite hide, they both knew the truth. Without speaking it, they were outnumbered, and running out of time, Then she saw something that made her breath catch, A shape was emerging from the purple clouds, Impossibly large, its hull gleaming with weapon arrays that made battle cruisers look like toys, By the ancient stars, whispered, what species builds ships that massive, Tilted his great head, studying the approaching vessel, I do not recognize the design, It is not, not any of the known powers, The ship slowed as it approached their position, and tensed, ready to fight or flee, But then a communication channel opened, and a voice spoke in heavily accented but understandable Galactic common, This is Captain Laura Hayes of the Earth Alliance vessel, We received your distress call, Miss, We are here to offer assistance, Earth, repeated, unfamiliar, with the name, I do not know this world, comma. We are new to the galactic stage, comma, the human captain replied, comma. And we do not like bullies, comma, especially ones who hunt people for refusing to surrender their freedom, comma. We are preparing to bring you aboard, comma, please. Do not be alarmed by the transport beam, comma. Looked at, comma, who projected calm reassurance through their bond, comma. We have little choice, comma. The dragon communicated mentally, comma. And I sense no deception from these humans, comma. Moments later, comma, blue light surrounded them both, and felt the strange sensation of her molecules being taken apart and put back together, comma, when her vision cleared, comma. She stood in a massive cargo bay with beside her, comma. The dragon barely fit even in this enormous space, comma. Human soldiers surrounded them, but kept their weapons lowered in a threatening stance, comma. A woman in a dark uniform approached, comma, her bearing confident but not aggressive, comma. Miss, comma, I am Captain Laura Hayes, comma, welcome aboard the, comma. You are safe here, comma. Safe, comma, repeated, comma, the word feeling foreign on her tongue, comma. They will come for us, comma, they always do, comma. You do not understand what you have done by sheltering us, comma. Laura smiled, comma, a strange expression that somehow conveyed both warmth and steel, comma. Oh, comma, I think we understand perfectly, comma. That is why we came, comma. Now, comma, you and your companion look like you could use medical attention, comma, food, comma, and rest, comma. We have much to discuss, comma. A younger human woman stepped forward, comma, Lieutenant Amy Stone, comma, Chief Engineer, comma. She introduced herself, comma. We have prepared quarters for you, an especially reinforced chamber for your dragon, comma. I hope they will be comfortable, comma. Lowered his great head to look at the small human, comma, projecting his thoughts through a translation device the humans quickly provided, comma. You show no fear of me, comma. Young one, comma, most species tremble in the presence of dragons, comma. Amy grinned, comma, we grew up with stories of dragons, comma, in our myths. They are powerful and wise, comma, sometimes dangerous, comma, but always magnificent, comma. It is an honor to meet a real one, comma. Over the next 3 hours, comma, sat in a comfortable observation room and told the humans everything, comma. She spoke of how they had been a peaceful but independent people, comma, skilled in void magic, and bonded with dragons who chose them as partners, comma. She described how the Empire had demanded they submit to imperial rule, comma, surrender their magic, comma, and break their bonds with the dragons, comma. When we refused, comma, continued, comma, her voice tight with old pain, comma, they declared us dangerous, comma. They said our magic and our dragon bonds threatened the stability of the galaxy, comma. But the truth was simpler, comma. We could not be conquered, comma, so they settled for destroying us instead, comma. Laura listened intently, comma, taking notes on a comma. And they have been hunting your people ever since, comma. For 3,000 years, comma, confirmed, comma. We were scattered across the galaxy, comma, forbidden from gathering in groups larger than 10, comma. Our dragons were hunted as prizes or killed as threats, comma. I am the last of the royal line, comma, the last who remembers what we were before the exile, comma. That ends now, comma, Laura said firmly, comma, you, and have requested asylum with the Earth Alliance, comma. We are granting that request, comma. You do not understand what that means, comma, protested, comma. The Empire is the most powerful force in the galaxy, comma. They have fleets that number in the thousands, comma, armies that have crushed entire civilizations, comma. Laura stood and walked to the observation window, comma, looking out at the purple nebula, comma. Miss, comma, let me tell you something about humans, comma. We are a young species, comma, barely 200 years into space travel, comma. We do not have ancient wisdom or thousands of years of history like most galactic powers, comma. But we have something else, comma. What is that, comma, asked, comma, curious despite herself, comma. Stubbornness, comma, Laura replied, comma, turning back with that steel smile, comma, and a really bad habit of doing things everyone says are impossible, comma. This ship we are standing in, comma, it should not exist according to physics, comma. They said we could not build something this large, comma, that the power requirements would be impossible to meet, comma, that the structural integrity would fail, comma. But you built it anyway, observed, We built it anyway, Laura confirmed, because when someone tells a human something cannot be done, we take it as a personal challenge, to think they can dictate terms to us, hunt our guests, and expect us to bow to their authority, they are about to learn otherwise, In the specially prepared dragon chamber, settled his massive form onto reinforced platforms, the humans had even provided heating elements to keep the space at a comfortable temperature for his kind, He reached out mentally to, These humans are either incredibly brave or completely insane, Perhaps both, replied mentally, But I begin to think they have made a terrible mistake, What mistake is that, They assumed humans would be like every other young species, afraid and obedient, But humans seem to have never learned how to be afraid, or, if they did, they chose to ignore the lesson, Back on the bridge, alarms suddenly blared, Commander looked up from her console with tension in her voice, Captain, We have multiple signatures emerging from hyperspace, 15 warships, battlecruiser class, and above, they are taking up attack formation, Laura sat in her command chair, her expression calm, time, until they are in weapons range, 3 minutes, replied, Laura nodded, sound general quarters, all hands to battle stations, and someone, bring Miss to the bridge, I want her to see what happens when humans decide to stand their ground, As the crew rushed to their positions with practiced efficiency, Laura allowed herself a moment of reflection, This moment would define not just her career, but possibly the future of humanity in the galaxy, They were about to challenge an empire that had ruled for, But that was fine, humans had always been good at challenging empires, The fleet moved into position, their ships bristling with weapons that had destroyed countless worlds, on the lead battlecruiser, Admiral Thorn Vex, studied his screens with confidence, one human ship against 15 warships, the outcome was certain, Or so he thought, Arrived on the bridge just as the fleet completed their formation, She stood beside Laura and watched the screen, her expression, a mixture of fear and hope, They will demand our surrender, said quietly, they always do, Then they are going to be disappointed, Laura replied, because humanity does not surrender its guests to bullies, no matter how big those bullies think they are, The communication channel opened, and Admiral Vex appeared on the screen, his features twisted in what passed for a smile among his kind, Human vessel, surrender the criminals, and the dragon immediately, do this, and the council may show mercy to your primitive species, Laura stood, buttoning her uniform jacket with deliberate calm, Admiral Vex, I am Captain Laura Hayes of the, I am afraid we cannot comply with your request, Vex mandibles clicked in agitation, cannot, or will not, Both, Laura said simply, you see, we have been learning about the so-called crimes of the people, apparently. Their real offense was refusing to surrender their independence to your empire, where I come from, We call that freedom, and we tend to support it, The admiral laughed, a strange chittering sound, You have one ship, Captain, We have 15, surrender now, or be destroyed, Laura smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression, Admiral, You have 30 minutes to withdraw your fleet from this sector, after that, we will consider your presence an act of war against humanity, She cut the transmission before he could respond, Turned to her, pale-faced, Captain, We just declared we would fight the Empire, Yes, Laura agreed, yes, we did, now let's show them why humans are terrible at knowing when to quit, The 30 minutes counted down with agonizing slowness on the bridge of the, Every crew member felt the weight of what was about to happen, They were going to fight the most powerful empire in the known galaxy, and they were going to do it alone, Admiral Vex watched his own countdown with a mixture of anticipation and slight unease, the human ship had not moved, had not powered weapons, had not done anything except sit there like a steel monument to arrogance, All vessels, attack formation Delta, Vex ordered his fleet, target their engines first, I want them crippled, not destroyed, the council will want to examine their technology, Sir, the tactical officer reported, we are detecting unusual energy readings from the human vessel, they are not charging weapons, it is something else entirely, On the Laura stood before a holographic display showing the fleet positioning for attack, had been given permission to remain on the bridge, with linked through a mental relay that projected his consciousness onto a secondary screen, Captain Hayes, said quietly, I appreciate your defense of us, but these are seasoned commanders, they have crushed entire civilizations, perhaps you should consider jumping to safety, Not our style, Laura replied without looking away from the display, She activated her communication link, Lieutenant Stone, how is our special package, Quantum fold drive is charged and ready, Captain, Amy voice came back through the speakers, but I am still not convinced this is wise, they have never encountered anything like this technology, That is exactly the point, Laura said, all hands, secure for combat maneuvers, miss, you might want to hold on to something, this is going to be interesting, The countdown reached 0, Vex gave the order, and his entire fleet opened fire simultaneously, plasma bolts and kinetic rounds streaked across the void, enough firepower to obliterate a city in seconds, the weapons raced toward the hull, and for a moment the admiral allowed himself to believe the battle was already won, Then the human ship vanished, not jumped to faster than light travel, not activated a cloaking device, but simply ceased to exist in that location, as if it had never been there at all, Where did it go, Vex demanded, his voice rising in pitch, scan all standard jump coordinates immediately, Sir, the tactical officer stammered, it did not jump, it is behind us, no wait, it is above us, sir, I cannot get a solid lock, it is everywhere and nowhere at once, There was executing a combat technique that violated everything they knew about physics, using the quantum fold drive, It was occupying multiple positions in space, simultaneously, flickering in and out of reality faster than their sensors could track, each time it appeared, It fired precisely targeted bursts from its and energy weapons, Ships began losing shields, then weapons arrays, then engine clusters, there was not trying to destroy them, it was systematically dismantling them with surgical precision that demonstrated complete control, This is impossible, Vex roared, his mandibles clicking in agitation, no species has quantum fold technology, it is purely theoretical, our best scientists have said it cannot be done, On the bridge of the crew worked with practiced efficiency, calling out targets, adjusting firing solutions, coordinating the jumps with split-second timing, watched in amazement as these humans fought like nothing she had ever seen, They fight like dragons, mental voice rumbled with approval, striking from impossible angles, turning size into an advantage rather than a weakness, These humans understand something they never learned, What is that, asked mentally, That rules are merely suggestion, especially rules about what is possible, Laura voice cut through the chaos, broadcasting to all ships, Admiral Vex, this is your second warning, withdraw now, or we start targeting your life support systems, You will have plenty of time to think about today while you wait for rescue, comma. But Vex had spent 300 years in the military, comma, retreat. Was unthinkable, comma, a stain on honor that could never be washed away, comma. All ships, comma, concentrate fire on coordinates Delta 73, comma. If it keeps appearing there, comma, we will anticipate its pattern and destroy it, comma. He never finished giving the complete order, comma. The materialized directly in front of his flagship Infinite Justice, comma, so close that its massive shadow fell across the bridge viewports, comma. The human dreadnought hung there motionless, comma, every weapon system aimed at vital points on the ship, comma. It was a silent promise of overwhelming destruction delivered without a single word, comma. Final warning, comma, Admiral, comma, Laura voice said quietly through the communication channel, comma, I do not want to kill anyone today, comma, but I will protect the people who asked for my help, comma. Your choice, comma, make it now, comma. Vex stared at the enormous vessel, comma, at weapons that could tear his flagship apart in seconds, comma, and felt something he had not experienced in decades, comma. It was genuine fear, comma, not for himself necessarily, comma, but for what this meant for the empire he served, comma. Humans were supposed to be a minor species, comma, barely worth monitoring, comma. Instead, they had just defeated an entire attack fleet, without destroying a single ship, comma, using technology that should not exist and tactics that every principle of conventional warfare, comma. Fleet, comma, Vex said slowly, comma, his mandibles clicking in what his crew recognized as resignation, comma, withdraw to safe distance, comma, cease all offensive operations immediately, comma. The ships began limping away into the nebula, comma, leaving behind debris, and shattered pride, comma, on the, comma, approached Laura with an expression mixing relief and shock, comma. Captain, comma, we did it, comma, we actually defeated a fleet, comma. We did, comma, Laura agreed, comma, her voice calm, comma. But this was just the opening move, comma, the council will not forget this, comma, they cannot afford to, comma. Stepped forward, comma, her violet eyes intense with emotion, comma, Captain Hayes, comma, do you understand what you have done here today, comma? You have just declared that humanity will not bow to the empire, comma. Every race in the galaxy will hear of this battle within days, comma. Laura met her gaze steadily, comma, good, comma. Let them hear, comma. Let them know that Earth does not abandon people who ask for help, comma, no matter how powerful their enemies think they are, comma. She gestured toward the departing fleet, comma. And let the Empire know that humans do not accept their version of impossible, comma. Mental voice rumbled through the bridge speakers, comma. You are a fascinating species, comma, Captain, comma. I begin to understand why the universe should fear you, comma. Laura smiled, comma. We prefer respect, comma, but fear works too if necessary, comma. She turned back to the main, where the stars beckoned beyond the nebula, comma, set course for Earth, comma, best speed, comma. I suspect the council is going to want a detailed report, comma, and we need to prepare, comma. This war is just beginning, and we need to be ready for whatever comes next, comma. As the turn toward home, comma, carrying an exiled elf princess and a legendary dragon, comma, no one on board fully grasped that they had just rewritten the balance of power in the galaxy, comma. The Empire 3,000 years of uncontested dominance had ended the moment humanity decided some rules were not worth following, comma. In the deepest chambers of the council, comma, ancient beings who had ruled the galaxy for received the initial reports of the battle, comma, High Chancellor Mora read through the details 3 times, comma, unable to believe what she was seeing, comma. A single human vessel had defeated 15 warships without taking significant damage, comma. It had used technology that violated known physics, comma, executed tactics that should have been impossible, comma, and done it all to protect 2 exiles the Empire had been hunting for centuries, comma. This changes everything, comma, she said to the empty chamber, comma. Counselor burst into the room moments later, comma, his 4 arms gesturing wildly, comma. We must respond with overwhelming force, comma, send the entire Third Fleet to Earth, comma, crush this upstart species. before they become a real threat to our authority, held up one crystalline hand for silence, and risk another humiliation, more losses, more proof that our empire is not as invincible as we claim, Then what do you suggest, demanded, I suggest we learn everything we can about humans, replied, because clearly we have underestimated them badly, Back on the sat in the observation deck, with presence strong in her mind, the dragon had been given a comfortable chamber, but preferred to maintain mental contact with her, These humans are remarkable, she said aloud, knowing he would hear her thoughts, They are dangerous, agreed, but not in the way the believe, their danger lies not in their weapons, but in their refusal to accept limitations, What do you mean, They built an empire on the idea that some things cannot change, explained, that the strong will always rule the weak, that the old ways are the only ways, but humans seem to believe that everything can change, that the impossible is merely something they have not figured out yet, Watched the stars slip past as the ship accelerated toward Earth, and you think this belief makes them dangerous, I think this belief makes them unstoppable, the dragon corrected, because a species that refuses to accept limits will eventually break every chain, shatter every rule, and reshape the galaxy itself, They should not fear human weapons, they should fear human ideas, In her quarters, Laura sat alone for the first time in hours, reviewing the battle data and planning for what came next, She knew they would not let this stand, empires did not maintain power by accepting defeat gracefully, But she also knew that humanity had crossed a line today, They had declared themselves willing to fight for principles, not just survival, They had chosen the side of the oppressed over the approval of the powerful, Her door chimed, and Kate entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee, Thought you might need this, Kate said, handing one to Laura, Thanks, Laura accepted it gratefully, What is the crew morale like, Honestly, Kate replied, sitting down, They are terrified and excited in equal measure, They know we just started something huge, We did not start it, Laura corrected, the started it 3,000 years ago, when they decided freedom was negotiable, We just reminded them it is not, Kate sipped her coffee, The Admiralty is going to have questions, a lot of questions, Let them ask, Laura said, We did what was right, If that costs me my command, so be it, But I will not regret standing up for people who needed help, That is why the crew follows you, Kate said quietly, Because they know you mean it, The journey to Earth would take 3 days at maximum speed, 3 days, for the news to spread across the galaxy, 3 days, for them to plan their response, 3 days for humanity to prepare for whatever came next, But in those 3 days, something else would happen, something neither Laura nor they could have predicted, Other species would start asking questions, if humans could defy the Empire, why could they not, if technology, the called impossible, could be built, what else had they been told was impossible that might actually be achievable, Seeds of doubt were being planted across the galaxy, and those seeds would soon grow into something the Empire could not control, Revolution was coming, not with armies or weapons, but with ideas, And that was the most dangerous revolution of all, The Grand Council Chamber was carved from a single massive crystal that had formed at the birth of their home star, 12 seats, arranged in a circle around a central holographic display, Today, that display showed the footage of Admiral Vex's retreat, played for the 5th time in 2 hours, High Chancellor Mora finally gestured for the display to stop, her crystalline form caught the chamber ambient light, casting rainbow patterns across the ancient walls, Enough, comma, she said, comma, her voice carrying harmonics that most species could not hear, comma. We have all seen what the humans are capable of, comma. The question now is what we do about this situation, comma. Counselor Venom slammed one of his forearms on his seat armrest, comma, his aggressive nature barely contained, comma. The answer is obvious to anyone with sense, comma. We send the entire Third Fleet to Earth and crush this upstart species before they inspire others to rebel against our authority, comma. And risk more embarrassment, comma, Counselor Senna countered from across the circle, comma. She was the youngest council member at barely 800 years old, comma. We sent 15 warships against one human vessel and could not even damage its shields, comma. What makes you think sending more ships will solve anything, comma? Because numbers always matter in warfare, comma, insisted, comma, his mandibles clicking rapidly, comma. The Third Fleet has over 300 vessels, comma, even with their impossible technology, comma. Humans cannot fight an entire armada and expect to win, comma. High Chancellor raised one hand for silence, comma, the gesture carrying authority earned over 4,000 years, comma. Counselor, comma, tell me something, comma. How did humans acquire quantum fold technology when our best scientists have declared it theoretically impossible, comma? A new voice spoke from the shadows between seats, comma, deep and unsettling, comma, perhaps. That is the wrong question to ask, comma, Chancellor, comma. All eyes turned to Counselor Zen, comma, the intelligence specialist, whose species had evolved in the crushing darkness of abyssal ocean trenches, comma. His smooth black skin seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, comma, making him difficult to focus on directly, comma. Explain your meaning, comma, commanded, comma. Zen moved forward into the light with movements that seemed almost liquid, comma. Our intelligence network has been monitoring human development since they achieved basic space flight 200 years ago, comma. Their progression has been highly unusual compared to other species. We have studied, comma. In what way unusual, comma, Senna asked, comma, leaning forward with interest, comma. They skip developmental steps that other species require centuries to master, comma. Zen explained, comma, activating data streams in the holographic display, comma. They make intuitive leaps that our scientists would need decades of careful research to validate, comma. It is as if they simply attempt the impossible and occasionally succeed through sheer audacity, comma. Your point, comma, growled impatiently, comma. My point is that humans do not think like we do, comma. Zen continued, comma. We build upon existing knowledge carefully and methodically, comma. We test theories extensively before implementation, comma. We follow established scientific principles without deviation, comma. But humans seem to simply try things that should not work, and sometimes discover they do work, comma. Senna studied the data streams with growing concern, comma. 20 years ago, comma, human scientists theorized quantum fold technology, comma. Our analysis concluded they would need 500 years to develop even a prototype, comma, assuming they did not destroy themselves in the process, comma. And yet here we are, comma, Zen said quietly, comma, because humans apparently do not calculate those odds, comma, or perhaps they calculate them and simply do not care about the risks, comma. Their history is filled with individuals who attempted impossible things and either succeeded brilliantly or failed catastrophically, comma. They seem to consider both outcomes acceptable as long as they learn something, comma. A heavy silence fell over the council chamber as the implications sank in, comma. Meanwhile, aboard the 2 days into the journey back to Earth, comma, sat in the ship library, surrounded by holographic displays showing human history, comma. What she was learning disturbed her more than any weapon ever had, comma. This cannot be accurate, comma, she murmured, comma, scrolling through battles, comma, inventions, comma, cultural revolutions that seem to defy logic, comma. They have only been space-faring for 200 years, comma, but their technological development rate, comma, is completely insane, comma. Right, comma, a cheerful voice said behind her, comma. Turned to see Lieutenant Amy Stone holding 2 steaming cups, comma. The young engineer offered one to, comma, who accepted it carefully, comma. She had learned that human beverages ranged from delightful to potentially dangerous, I do not understand your species, admitted, taking a cautious sip of the hot chocolate Amy had brought, My people took 3,000 years to develop void magic to its current sophistication. Dragons took 10,000 years to perfect mental bonding, Yet humans went from primitive rockets to quantum fold drives in 2 centuries, How is that possible, Amy sat down with a grin, Want to know the secret, We steal everything we can, Steal, repeated, confused, Not literally, well, sometimes literally, Amy laughed, But mostly we learned from everyone, When we met the coalition 50 years ago, We studied their shield technology until we understood it, when we encountered the silicate collective, We adapted their metallurgy techniques, every species we meet, We ask how things work, then we try to make improvements, But the quantum fold drive, pressed, surely. You did not steal that from anyone, That one was all human ingenuity, Amy said with obvious pride, A team led by Dr. Helen Park theorized it based on quantum entanglement principles, The said it was impossible, so naturally. We had to prove them wrong, That is kind of our thing as a species, Your thing, Someone tells us something cannot be done, and humans take it as a personal challenge, Amy explained, The first 3 prototypes exploded spectacularly. Dr. Park lost her left arm in the second explosion, But she kept working because she was determined to see if it was actually possible, Stared at the young woman, That seems incredibly reckless and dangerous, Oh, it absolutely is dangerous, Amy agreed cheerfully, We are either brilliant or insane, And honestly it is often hard to tell which, But that is humanity, We would rather try and fail than never try at all, In his specially reinforced chamber, lay coiled in comfort, His mental voice reached across the ship to, I have been communing with the ship artificial intelligence, he said, It is a fascinating creation, almost alive in some ways, yet clearly not biological, The humans have given it personality and decision-making capabilities, What have you learned from it, asked mentally, while Amy continued talking about human innovation, That humans built this vessel not primarily for war, but for exploration, replied, The weapons were added almost as an afterthought when they issued their size restrictions, These people are not natural warriors, They are natural explorers who learn to fight because others tried to limit their freedom, That makes them more dangerous, not less, observed, Indeed, the dragon agreed, But it also makes them more honorable in their own way, They fight for principles rather than power, We chose well when we broadcast that distress signal, Back in the council chamber, High Chancellor made a decision that would change the course of galactic history, We will not send the Third Fleet to Earth, not immediately, What, protested loudly, We must respond with overwhelming strength or appear weak, No, said firmly, her ancient voice carrying absolute authority, We respond with intelligence instead of brute force, Counselor. Zen, I want your network to gather everything possible on human psychology, tactics, and technological capabilities, I want to understand what we are truly dealing with, And what of the elf and dragon, demanded, still agitated, They remain free under human protection, a direct violation of the exile decree, Stood slowly, her crystalline form casting long shadows in the chamber light, Then perhaps it is time we questioned why we issued that decree 3,000 years ago, If humans can see value in alliance with the, Perhaps our ancestors were too hasty in their judgment, The council chamber erupted in shocked voices talking over each other, The suggestion of overturning the exile decree was unprecedented, Are you suggesting we admit we were wrong, Senna asked carefully, that we unjustly persecuted an entire species, I am suggesting the galaxy has changed, replied calmly, a new power has emerged that does not respect our authority or fear our military might, we can either adapt to this new reality or face obsolescence, as other species follow the human example, but our entire authority structure is built on the exile decree and similar decisions, another counselor protested, if we admit error, it undermines everything, perhaps our authority should be questioned if it was built on injustice, said quietly, the humans have taught us something today, impossibility is merely a matter of perspective, perhaps it is time we changed ours before it is too late, As the council debated long into their night cycle, across the galaxy, something remarkable was happening, news of the battle had spread through unofficial channels, species that had quietly resented authority for centuries were suddenly asking dangerous questions, On the, ambassador Tora reviewed the battle footage with her advisors, if one human ship can defeat 15 vessels, what does that mean for us, she asked, we have 3 times the population of Earth, why do we still bow to the Empire, Similar conversations were happening on dozens of worlds, the Silicate Collective, the Aquarian League, even the mysterious Void Dwellers were reconsidering their relationship with the, Aboard the, Laura received reports of these developments with mixed feelings, we have started something we might not be able to control, she told Kate during their daily briefing, Is that a bad thing, Kate asked, I honestly do not know, Laura admitted, we wanted to help 2 people who asked for asylum, now we might have accidentally started a galactic revolution, Kate smiled slightly, very human of us, act first, consider consequences later, Laura laughed despite the situation, fair point, she looked at the star charts showing their position, one more day. Until we reach Earth, then the real challenges begin, What do you think will happen, Kate asked, Honestly, Laura said, I think the galaxy is about to discover that the age of empires is ending, not because we want to destroy the, but because we have shown other species that they do not have to accept being ruled, ideas are more dangerous than any weapon, Kate, and we just gave the galaxy a very dangerous idea, the idea that freedom is worth fighting for, Kate said quietly, Exactly, Laura agreed, and once that idea takes root, no empire can stand against it forever, they have 3,000 years of authority to defend, we have 1 ship and a stubborn refusal to accept that some things cannot be challenged, Smart money is on the stubborn humans, Kate said with a grin, Laura smiled back, let us hope you are right, because we are all betting everything on that stubborn human nature, As the drew closer to home, carrying its precious cargo of hope and revolution, the galaxy held its breath, something fundamental had shifted in the balance of power, and everyone knew nothing would ever be the same again, The emerged from its final jump into Earth's solar system to find a welcoming committee that made catch her breath in surprise, 47 human vessels ranging from frigates to carriers held formation around the blue-green planet, but what truly shocked her was the other ship at the center of the formation, It was in design, unmistakable even after 3,000 years of separation, the sleek vessel gleamed with the silver-white alloy her people were famous for creating, along its hull, void magic runes, pulsed with soft light that brought tears to eyes, That is impossible, she whispered, pressing her hand against the observation window, that were scattered across the galaxy, There are barely 1,000 of us left in total, how, Captain Laura Hayes stood beside her with a knowing smile on her face, turns out when we started asking questions about your people and their history, We got some very interesting responses, including a message from someone who claims to be your cousin, The communication channel opened, and a face had not seen in over 2 centuries appeared on the display screen, hello cousin, it has been far too long, voice cracked with emotion she could not contain, you are alive, I thought you had died in the persecution of Prime, grinned, looking remarkably unchanged by the passage of time, alive, and currently making the council extremely nervous, when word spread through our hidden networks that humans had rescued you and, something changed, the scattered began gathering for the first time in centuries, we are not alone anymore, we have allies who actually mean it, Over the next 3 days, Earth played host to a gathering that was unprecedented in galactic history. Ambassadors from 24 species arrived, including several who had previously bowed completely to authority, the council chamber in the human city called Geneva had been hastily expanded to accommodate various species' environmental requirements, President Maria stood before the assembly, her presence commanded attention, despite being physically smaller than most aliens in the room, Representatives of the galactic community, she began with clear, strong voice, Earth has called this gathering because we believe it is time for an honest conversation about the current power structure and how it serves or fails to serve the common good, A representative named Ambassador Shear rose from his designated seat, he had been deliberately chosen to appear less threatening than the usual diplomats, President, with all due respect, Earth has been part of the galactic community for barely 50 years, perhaps your species should learn our established ways before attempting to change systems that have maintained peace for, With respect, Ambassador, Laura Hayes spoke from her position behind the president, her voice firm, but not hostile, we have been learning your ways for 50 years now, we have learned that the Empire maintains control primarily through fear and intimidation, we have learned that you actively suppress technological development in younger species, we have learned that you rewrite historical records to justify your actions, frankly, we have had quite enough of those particular lessons, Shocked murmurs rippled through the chamber at such direct confrontation, most species would never dare speak so bluntly to a representative, But Laura continued, pulling up holographic displays that showed historical documents, 3,000 years ago, that were exiled for supposedly threatening galactic stability, the official records claim they were dangerous, that their void magic and dragon bonds posed existential risks, we have now examined actual historical records from neutral species who maintained archives, the truth is considerably simpler and less flattering, they were exiled because they successfully defended their independence, because they could not be conquered or controlled, Stood from where she had been seated, her presence regal despite wearing simple borrowed human clothing, Captain Hayes speaks only truth, my people defended ourselves against imperial expansion and were punished severely for our success, we were scattered, hunted like animals, and nearly destroyed completely, not for being dangerous to the galaxy, but for being free and refusing to surrender that freedom, Ambassador Sheer mandibles clicked rapidly in visible agitation, these are extremely serious accusations you are making, They are documented facts, interrupted Ambassador Tora of the Coalition, one of the first species to establish peaceful contact with humanity, that have maintained secret archives for over 4,000 years, we know exactly what happened to the, we stayed silent because we feared suffering the same fate if we spoke truth, One by one, other species began speaking up with revelations that shocked even the humans, The Silicate Collective revealed how they had forced them to abandon promising technological discoveries, the Aquarian League spoke of trade restrictions that had deliberately stunted their economic development for centuries, even the normally silent void dwellers transmitted a message confirming they had been threatened with complete extinction if they shared their faster-than-light communication technology. With younger species, the weight of testimony was crushing, 3,000 years of carefully maintained control was unraveling in a single day before dozens of witnesses, enough, Ambassador Shear finally shouted, his composure cracking, the Empire has maintained peace and stability in this galaxy for, would you prefer the chaos of constant warfare between species, We would prefer freedom, President said quietly, but with absolute conviction, but Ambassador, we are not here to destroy the Empire or seek revenge, we are here to propose something that may seem radical, actual cooperation between species who see each other as equals rather than rulers and subjects, She gestured to Laura, who activated new displays showing proposed trade agreements, technology, sharing protocols, and mutual defense pacts that did not require submission to any central authority, Earth proposes the formation of what we are calling the Galactic Confederation, President continued, a voluntary alliance where each species maintains complete sovereignty, but agrees to mutual defense and open scientific collaboration, no empire, no forced submission, just willing cooperation between free peoples, The Council will never accept such a proposal, Shear protested, though his voice had lost much of its earlier confidence, Then the Council faces a clear choice, Laura said calmly, join the Confederation as equals with everyone else, or watch as the galaxy moves forward and leaves your empire behind, because I can promise you this, Ambassador, we are not going back to the way things were, too many species have now seen that there is another path forward, In the observation areas above the main chamber floor, massive form drew attention from every being present, his mental voice resonated through translation. Devices the humans had created specifically for this gathering, For 10,000 years, my kind bonded with thee as partners and friends, we were labeled as weapons of mass destruction by the Empire, but we are not weapons, we are individuals with our own thoughts and desires, we are partners who choose our bonds freely, They could never understand this because they see everything through the lens of control and domination, humanity understands that some things cannot and should not be controlled, they understand respect and voluntary cooperation, that is why my bonded partner, and I stand with them today, The chamber fell into profound silence, a dragon endorsement carried weight that transcended normal politics, dragons were living history, beings who had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations across tens of thousands of years, Ambassador Shear looked around the chamber and saw species who had been loyal subjects of the Empire for centuries now looking at him with something new in their expressions, It was not quite hostility, but it was no longer the automatic deference he was accustomed to receiving, I must consult with the Grand Council, he said finally, this is far beyond my authority to negotiate, Take all the time you need, President replied, but know this, whether the Empire joins or not, the Confederation is moving forward, 17 species have already signed the charter, we expect many more to join in the coming weeks, 3 days later, the Grand Council convened in another emergency session, High Chancellor reviewed reports with a mixture of resignation and grudging respect she had not felt in, 17 species have signed, 23 more are openly considering it, Counselor Senna reported, our intelligence networks suggest those numbers will grow rapidly, The humans have completely outmaneuvered us, Counselor Zen observed from his shadowed position, not with weapons or military force, but with ideas and the promise of genuine equality, They have given the galaxy something we never offered, hope for a different future, Counselor looked ready to argue, but even his aggressive nature could not deny the obvious truth, military force would not solve this particular problem, the Empire could potentially destroy the human fleet, maybe even conquer Earth itself through overwhelming numbers, but the idea had already spread too far, dozens of species now knew there was a real alternative to authority, The question we face, High Chancellor said slowly, is whether we have the wisdom and flexibility to change with the times, Change, sputtered in disbelief, We are the Empire, we have endured for 3,000 years precisely, because we do not change our fundamental principles, And that inflexibility, said softly, is exactly why we are about to lose everything we have built, The galaxy has changed around us, while we refuse to adapt, A new power has emerged that plays by completely different rules, We can either learn those new rules or become irrelevant, She stood with visible effort, her ancient crystalline form straightening with decision, I vote that the Empire formally request membership in the Galactic Confederation, as equals with all other member species, not as rulers, not as the dominant power, but as one voice among many equals, The council chamber erupted in chaos and shouting, But when the vote was finally called after hours of heated debate, the result was narrow but definitive, 6 votes in favor, 5 opposed, 1 abstention, the Empire would join the Confederation and accept the end of its 3,000-year dominance, The galaxy would never be the same, Power had shifted not through conquest or warfare, but through the simple human belief that everyone deserved freedom and respect, And that belief had just changed everything, 6 months had passed since the formation of the Galactic Confederation, and stood on a balcony overlooking Earth's first spaceport designed specifically to accommodate dragons, The facility sprawled across several kilometers, with reinforced platforms and climate-controlled chambers, lounged beside her in the warm sunlight, his golden scales gleaming brilliantly, Below them, construction crews worked on a vessel that represented everything the Confederation stood for, The ship was being built by a truly mixed team, humans worked alongside, collaborated with, and even the usually isolated Silicate Collective had sent engineers, together. They were creating the first joint flagship, a symbol of what cooperation could achieve, Do you think it will last, asked, watching a human and worker coordinate on a complex structural joint, Laura Hayes had joined them on the balcony, carrying the ever-present cup of coffee that seemed permanently attached to human commanders, She considered the question carefully before responding, Honestly, I do not know for certain, she admitted, We are asking species who have spent thousands of years in rigid hierarchies to suddenly see each other as equals, That kind of change does not come easy or fast, There will be conflicts, disagreements, maybe even serious problems, Then why do you seem so optimistic, asked with genuine curiosity, Because humans are natural optimists, Laura replied with her characteristic grin, We believe that impossible things can become possible if people work hard enough, this ship down there, It should be impossible to build according to traditional engineering, It combines technologies from 12 different species, each with different approaches to physics and different assumptions about what works, But you are building it anyway, observed, We are building it anyway, Laura confirmed, Because when someone tells a human that different perspectives cannot work together, we hear that as a challenge, We look at all those different technologies and different ways of thinking, and we ask why not try to combine them, What is the worst that could happen, Rumbling laugh echoed across the spaceport, causing several workers below to look up and wave, The worst that could happen is catastrophic failure, and possibly massive explosions, the dragon communicated through the translation device, Exactly, Laura agreed cheerfully, But the best that could happen is we create something none of us could build alone, something that represents the combined knowledge and creativity of dozens of species, working toward a common goal, to humans, that potential reward is always worth the risk, You are a strange species, Captain Hayes, said, but there was warmth in her voice, We prefer interesting, Laura replied, It is one of our favorite words, Movement near the landing platforms caught their attention, A shuttle was arriving, and recognized the design as, moments later, High Chancellor Mora herself emerged, moving with careful dignity, her crystalline form caught the sunlight and created rainbow patterns on the platform, That is unexpected, Laura murmured, the High Chancellor herself, This must be important, They met in one of the conference rooms that had been prepared for diplomatic meetings of all kinds, The ancient leader settled into a specially designed seat and studied the three of them for a long moment before speaking, Captain Hayes, Miss, she began formally, I have come to offer a personal apology, Felt her breath catch in surprise, an apology, from the leader of the empire, Continued, her voice carrying the weight of, I have spent the past 6 months reviewing historical archives that had been sealed for 3,000 years, records that my predecessors deemed too dangerous for general knowledge, What I found shamed me deeply, She activated a holographic display that showed documents, battle, reports, and testimony from the time of the exile, Your people were not exiled because they threatened the galaxy, said quietly, They were exiled because they proved that a species could remain independent and still thrive, Because they showed other younger species that submission to the empire was not the only path to survival, My ancestors feared that example more than any weapon, So they destroyed us to protect their power, said, her voice tight with old pain, Yes, confirmed without hesitation, and in doing so, they committed a grave injustice that has poisoned the galaxy for 3,000 years, I cannot undo what was done, I cannot restore the lives lost or the centuries stolen, but I can acknowledge the truth and work to ensure such injustice never happens again, What are you proposing, Laura asked carefully, Straightened in her seat, the council has voted to formally abolish the exile decree and all similar laws, furthermore, we are offering full reparations to the people, including restored territories, technological support, and a seat on the Confederation Leadership Council, Found herself unable to speak, after 3,000 years of persecution, the empire was not just apologizing, but offering to help rebuild what they had destroyed, There is one more thing, added, we have located approximately 3,000 more scattered across the galaxy, many had hidden their identity for generations, living in fear, with your permission, we would like to help them return home, Tears streamed down face, 3,000, we thought there were barely 1,000 of us left, you found 3,000 more, and counting, confirmed, every day our search teams find more, the people are not as extinct as we had believed, they were simply hiding, waiting for a time when it was safe to reveal themselves, Mental voice resonated with emotion the dragon rarely showed, This is more than we dared hope, High Chancellor, It is less than you deserve, replied, but it is a beginning, she turned to Laura, and humanity made this possible, your refusal to accept our authority, your willingness to fight for strangers, It forced us to examine ourselves in ways we had avoided for, You have given us a gift, Captain, the gift of perspective, Laura smiled, We just did what seemed right, the rest of you did the hard work of actually changing, Over the following weeks, the galaxy continued to transform in ways both large and small, the Confederation grew to include 42 species, each maintained their sovereignty, but contributed to collective defense and shared knowledge freely, The joint flagship, eventually named Unity in 15 different languages simultaneously, was completed ahead of schedule, Its maiden voyage included crew members from 30 species, including a navigation officer, working alongside an engineer, was offered command of the vessel but declined, choosing instead to focus on reuniting her scattered people and rebuilding their culture, took the position, becoming the first to command a major vessel in 3,000 years, Laura received promotion to admiral and command of Earth-growing fleet, but she spent much of her time traveling between worlds, helping newly independent species navigate the challenges of self-governance, One evening, and Laura sat together, watching the sunset from the same balcony, where this part of their journey had begun, was visiting other dragons who had emerged from hiding, gathering for the first time in living memory, We did it, said quietly, We actually changed the galaxy, You did most of it, Laura replied, you and, you were willing to ask for help, to trust that someone might actually respond, without that distress signal, none of this happens, But you answered, pointed out, when you had every reason to ignore us, every logical argument for staying out of it, You answered anyway, why, Laura was quiet for a moment, watching the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky, My grandfather used to tell me a story, She said finally, about a time when humanity was not united, when we were divided into competing nations that often fought each other, He said the turning point came when people started helping each other not because it was logical or profitable, but simply because it was right, because someone needed help and they could provide it. That is a very human perspective, observed, Maybe, Laura agreed, but I think it is becoming a galactic perspective now, look at what we have built, not through conquest or domination, but through voluntary cooperation, species working together because they choose to, because they see value in each other, Do you think they have really changed, asked, can an empire that old truly transform, I think they are trying, Laura said, and that is what matters, change is not instant, it is a process, they will make mistakes, there will be setbacks, but the fact that they are willing to try, that is significant, Nodded slowly, 3,000 years, she whispered, 3,000 years of exile, of hiding, of fear, and it ends not with revenge, but with reconciliation, it feels almost unreal, That is the thing about impossible things, Laura said with a smile, Once they happen, they stop being impossible and just become reality, the hard part is believing they can happen in the first place, Below them, the spaceport continued its constant activity, ships from dozens of worlds coming and going, crews mixing freely without regard for old hierarchies, engineers sharing knowledge that would have been hoarded jealously just months ago, Returned as the stars grew brighter, his mental voice warm with contentment, I have been speaking with others of my kind, He communicated, we have decided to form a dragon council to advise the Confederation, to share the wisdom we have gained across, That is wonderful, responded mentally, the galaxy could benefit greatly from dragon wisdom, We could also benefit from learning, replied, these younger species, especially humans, have much to teach us about adaptation and innovation, about trying new things without fear of failure, We dragons have become perhaps too set in our ways, Laura laughed, did I just hear a dragon admit that humans might be right about something, You heard a dragon admit that wisdom comes from many sources, corrected with amusement, even from species who are barely out of their caves, by dragon standards, The three friends sat together in comfortable silence as full darkness fell, and the galaxy spread out above them, somewhere up there, the Confederation was growing stronger, species were learning to work together, old wounds were beginning to heal, It was not perfect, there were still conflicts and disagreements, still species who chose isolation over cooperation, still voices arguing for a return to the old ways, But something fundamental had shifted in the balance of power, The age of empires built on fear and control was ending, A new age was beginning, one built on cooperation and mutual respect, And it had all started because one human captain refused to accept that some things were impossible, because one elf princess and her dragon companion dared to ask for help, because enough beings across the galaxy were willing to try something new, The Galactic Empire had panicked when humans commanded ships that massive, but that had never been the real threat, The real threat, the thing that had ultimately brought down 3,000 years of imperial control, was the simple human belief that freedom belonged to everyone, that cooperation was better than domination, that the impossible was just the next challenge to overcome, And as sat between her human friend and her dragon companion, watching the stars that had once seemed so hostile now appearing full of possibility, she understood something profound, The galaxy had not just changed, it had been reborn, And this time, it would be built on hope instead of fear, That made all the difference, Somewhere in the depths of space, the Unity prepared for its first mission, carrying the hopes of 42 species working together, And on Earth, in the scattered communities of, and on hundreds of other planets, beings of every description looked up at the same stars and felt something they had not felt in a very long time, They felt hope for the future, And that, more than any weapon or technology, was what would carry them forward into tomorrow,